Now these are some samples of a risk matrix, and we'll go through these in detail on your slide. There'll be a screen capture here where I'll do an exercise with these. But effectively, like anywhere else in life, red means danger, red means don't go there, and green means safer. Now you look on this slide here, this risk matrix, and it's used to determine the severity of a risk or a control action. So a risk matrix has two things, no matter what it is, no matter what it looks like, it have two things in common. One is the consequence of the risk occurring. So if you look down the side, you can see there's minimal, minor, moderate, major, or extreme. So if the consequence of something occurring is extreme, then we look at the likelihood. So we've got consequence down one side, likelihood across the other axis. If it's almost certain that it's going to happen, and the consequence is extreme, then we're right down there in that red zone, and we are not proceeding with whatever that activity was until we can get that risk under control. As an example of using the risk matrix, let's look at an example of something that we do every day, which is driving a car, pulling from a quiet road onto a very busy motorway. So if we look at consequence and likelihood, what is the consequence if we get that wrong and we pull out at the wrong time onto a very busy motorway where cars are doing 100 k's an hour? The consequence could be extreme. One fatality, possibly multiple fatalities. It could be an extreme incident if you get that wrong and cause a crash. What's the likelihood of that happening? Well, if you don't look, you're not a very good driver, and you don't look at all, or the conditions are really poor, and you're not paying attention, and you pull straight onto that motorway, then it's almost certain or very likely that that will happen. So your risk is unacceptable at that point in time. You've got an extreme consequence and a high likelihood that it would happen. So what do? How do we control that risk? Well, we want to reduce the consequence. So it's going to be hard to reduce the consequence of pulling onto a major road, because at any time that you want to pull onto a major road, if you get hit by cars travelling at high speed, the consequence is very likely to ever be minimal. We would take a different entry onto that motorway where the traffic's moving at 60 k's an hour, or it might be stopped at traffic lights. So there our consequence is minimal because the vehicles are moving much slower. But the likelihood we can reduce significantly. So if we've, for starters, that we're a licensed driver, we're a good driver, our eyesight's good, we can see traffic coming, we understand what's going on in the road, we're waiting for a big break in the traffic, not for a small break in the traffic, or we're waiting for a red light so there's no traffic. All these things can reduce the likelihood of that risk occurring. So that's how we work it. We've got our consequence and our likelihood, and we keep putting controls in place to reduce that. We want to get right from the red area to the green area. And here's our risk scoring matrix. You can see this here. So in the red, it's intolerable. So that activity will not commence, and the hazard must be eliminated because it is too risky. The consequences are too high and the likelihood's too high. And then we go down through these into the orange, where the activity won't commence until somebody has approved it and had a look at it. Then we've got down to the yellow, where the activity won't commence unless appropriate supervision might be in place. And then we're in the green zone, so we can perform the task in accordance with the controls because we've managed that risk down to that tolerable level. How do we control risk? Now here we are back to our hierarchy of controls. Now we looked at the definitions earlier on. If we go back to our example of chemicals. So we eliminate the risks, we completely remove the chemicals from the environment that we're in. We substitute the risk. So we substitute those chemicals for a safer version. So less flammable, less toxic, less poisonous, doesn't give off gases. Something that if we come into contact with it will do much less harm. So we've substituted that risk. Or we've removed the use of chemicals and we've substituted it for a mechanical process. So instead of using chemicals to clean something, we're going to use a mechanical process. Now we've got the isolation option. So we isolate people from the risk. We put our fencing in place. We put our chemical storage container in place. That isolates that risk. We've got our engineering control again, which might be our tamper-proof lids. It might be that the chemicals are chained so that they can't be pulled, they can't be moved. These are engineered controls. And we've got our administrative control, which is our signage, it's our posters, it's our training of people in safe use of chemicals. These are all administrative controls. And finally is our personal protective equipment. So here's where we fall back on our masks, our ear protection, our eye protection, gloves and things.